Oh. We are going to go ahead and get started today. Welcome to Friday. Welcome to seventh period, environmental science. You guys on Wednesday, not Thursday. On Wednesday, you had a writing assignment. Okay, on your writing assignment, I showed you how to get the Canvas, how to open it, how to complete it. It was due last night at midnight. If you haven't got that done, please get that completed as soon as possible. If you need help figuring out how to find it or how to complete it, please let me know so that I can help walk you through that. I have a few of them graded. The rest will be graded definitely for sure by Monday. I can check on your submissions in just a few minutes. When you guys are working, I can check and let you know on your submissions. So you should have done that. And then I ask you sometime between class on Wednesday and today to go to Canvas to do your vocabulary and your direct instruction. If you haven't done that, please make sure you get that done sometime over the weekend. Hey, it's labeled by date in Canvas. So just make sure that you're completing those couple of modules for each day. That way we don't get to the interim at the end of September and you're trying to rush back and do everything so you'll be prepared. I don't want you to wait till December and try to turn something in and you have to go back and do this. Make sure you're kind of keeping up as we go. 1 or 2 a day is much easier than having to do 17 all at one time. So for today's new stuff, we're going to look at invasive species. We're going to look at non-native species in aquatic ecosystems. All right, we know what ecosystems are because we've been talking about those. Where you live, the plants, the animals, all of the living things in that area. So now we're going to look at aquatic. In the chat box, take just a second. What does aquatic mean? All right, an aquatic environment is water. We've been talking about, or we were talking Wednesday about aquatic environments. Ponds, lakes, streams, rivers, oceans, swamps, marshes. All of those things are aquatic environments. That means they have water. Give me just 1 second, guys. Somebody is having problems getting in. Okay, let me get her the link. There we go. My apologies. All right, so anything or any ecosystem that is mainly water, a pond, a lake, a stream, river, ocean, all of those are aquatic. So the next things we're going to look at are invasive and non-native. I think this video, oh, no, we're not quite to the video yet, sorry. All right, so first we're going to look at non-native. What do you think? And I'm going to ask you to put some answers on the whiteboard. I have shared the whiteboard with you. At the top, you need to go to annotate. Okay, you should have a button that says annotate, and then you can write or draw on the whiteboard. All right, you should have a button that says annotate at the top, and then you should be able to write or draw on the whiteboard. Try that now, and on the whiteboard, define non-native. Have a button at the top that says annotate. Then on the board, you can define or tell me what you think it means, non-native. Something that comes from another area. All right, so if it is, get back to it, there we go. If it is non-native, it comes from somewhere else. Not to the original area, something that was introduced, a living or non-living thing that is from another environment. So if it is non-native, it's not from there originally. That's non-native, not from there originally. Now we're going to look at the difference in non-native and invasive. I'm going to put the link in the chat box for you, and then I'm going to, in case you need it, but you should be able to hear and see when I share my screen in just 1 second.
What causes the loss of over 50% of the native global biodiversity? Could it be climate change, overexploitation, genetically modified foods, human overpopulation? Surprisingly, it's introduced an invasive species. These are species that negatively affect plants and animals in the habitat they were introduced to. Invasive species outcompete native species in a variety of ways. They can grow faster, reproduce more often with more offspring, disperse farther and faster, change form in case of hazardous surroundings, tolerate a wider range of environments, live off more sources of food, associate with humans, or have prior successful invasions. Australia's fight against cane toads is probably the most widely known example of invasive species. Cane toads were originally brought to Australia to protect the sugarcane crops by feeding on cane beetles. Sadly, it didn't work, and the idea went south from there. The toads quickly abandoned the sugarcane crops because they weren't able to reach the cane beetles at the top. Having the ability to eat a wide variety of food, they easily invaded the surrounding countryside and continued to increase their coverage of Australia up to 60 kilometers per year. Also, it turned out that cane toads are poisonous to Australia's native lizards and snakes, which caused a rapid decline in their populations. There's been a long history of individuals trying to control perceived pests by introducing foreign species, only to have their plans backfire. An example of this is the small Indian mongoose, which was introduced to reduce rat populations but instead fed on incredibly rare bird species. Or the New Guinea flatworm, which was introduced to reduce the giant East African snail but instead reduced the rare land snail fauna only native to that island. Or the ermine, which, after being introduced to New Zealand to control rat and hare populations, ended up becoming a threat to native bird species. The vast majority of introduced and invasive species are not intentional blunders, but accidental or inadvertent. Usually, they are just stowaways in cargo shipping, as was the case with the Asian tiger mosquito, which has spread across the globe. They breed in the water sitting in the bottom of tires that were kept outside, and managed to catch a ride around the world. Chestnut blight is responsible for the widespread destruction of this once common chestnut tree. It is thought that it was brought over by contaminated Japanese chestnut trees. Within 40 years, the entire 4 billion chestnut tree population was devastated. From the Americas, the Dutch brought back wild sage to Europe, which quickly spread and invaded Asia and Oceania. In the early 80s, warty comb jellies were introduced from North America to the Black Sea when they were hitching a ride in the ballast waters of oil tankers. The common starling made its way to North America by the way of Eugene Schieffelin, who tried to introduce every bird mentioned in the works of William Shakespeare, for some reason. And lastly, the black rat, which is now found across the globe thanks to shipping from their native home of India. Although some of the worst invasive species are common animals such as wild dogs, cats, pigs, goats, and gray squirrels, the problem is that outside of their native ecosystem, they cause havoc to crops, food webs, and spread disease. Some introduced species have made beneficial relationships. What would New Zealand be without their sheep? The only native land animal to New Zealand is the lesser short-tailed bat. And consider zebra mussels, who in some circumstances can clean lake water so native species can thrive. But remember, invasive species can have devastating effects on ecosystems and spread nasty diseases. So make sure you buy your firewood at your campsite, pour out that old bird bath, and Neville, maybe it's time you left Trevor at home this year.
So we learned that non-native means it comes from somewhere else. In the video, he talked about invasive species. In the chat box, give me an example or list one of the invasive species that was talked about in the video. The cane toad. Okay. Anybody got another invasive species from the video? Rats. Ugh. Toads. Rabbits. And he talks about dogs, wild dogs, and cats, also very invasive. Dogs. All right, so there are a lot of different animal and plant species that can be invasive. Anything that is from somewhere else originally is non-native, meaning it doesn't belong. If it's from somewhere else originally, it's non-native, it doesn't belong. If it doesn't harm anything or it even helps, we still call it non-native. As long as it doesn't harm, it's fine. It's still just non-native. But once it comes in, if it harms the environment or the animals there, it has a negative impact, we call it invasive. So all of it is non-native because it's from somewhere else. But if it has a negative impact on the animals, the plants, the environment around it, we call it invasive. And I'm going to give you some examples. These particular examples are from aquatic or water ecosystems. A lot of the ones in the video are from land or dry ecosystems. These are particular to aquatic ecosystems for today's lessons. The zebra mussels up here, they are invasive. They come in, they take over. They usually eat the food or the algae that other mussels and clams would eat. If they eat their food, the others die out quicker. Chinese mitten crabs, down here at the bottom, they're just kind of cute and fluffy, but they're not harmful. Okay? They don't harm the environment. I mean, yeah, they eat some stuff, but they don't kill the environment. They don't kill off other species. Hydrilla are very invasive. If you see them up here, yes, if they take or come into and you see them in your pond, they will take over eventually. A lot of times they can clog the waterways. They can clog up, if you have a drainage system, they can clog those up. They can even clog if they get into the pipes where water from your well or from water systems is coming through. Okay. They keep multiplying pretty quickly until they clog those areas. They may prevent things from getting to the water. The European green crab is also invasive. Okay. It hunts more or needs more to eat, and it hunts better than a lot of the native crabs to those areas. You eat all the other crabs' food, that means that they have less to eat, and that species might start dying off. Green crabs will also find traps where fishermen have laid traps for eels and eat and kill or even harm the eels in the traps. That means that the fishermen who are trying to catch those eels to sell and make money are going to lose money, so it's actually harming the fishing industry as well. Sea lamprey, right down here, are invasive. Okay, they will come in, take over. They can suck the blood and fluids out of fish, leaving them sickened or even dead. But if they come in and take over, that means they start killing more fish, which can harm the environment, harm the fishing industry. The last one we're going to talk about today are Asian carp. They are invasive as well. They come from Asia. They come in and take over. And I think the guy in this video kind of explains it a little better than I do. So give me 1 second and I'm going to share my video with you.
This is what happens when a particular population of fish in the Illinois River is startled.
Yeah, oh, right around back, behind the boat. Wow. Watch out. They're everywhere.
These are silver carp, the most notorious of the Asian carp family. Many believe the Illinois River has the densest population of silver carp in the nation.
That's kind of ground zero on this invasion.
Asian carp were introduced to the United States in the 1970s to control algae in catfish farms in the South. In the 1980s, floodwaters allowed the carp to escape and infest the Mississippi River basin.
When it comes to the river systems, if it's connected, if it's got a direct connection to the Mississippi or the Illinois River, it's going to have these fish in it.
Asian carp not only disrupt the food chain, push out native fish, are a nuisance to boaters, but they are also extremely dangerous.
Yeah, this is about an average size silver carp. This is one that can hurt you when it jumps. If your boat's going 20, 30 miles an hour and this guy hits you, it's going to leave a mark.
It was a flying silver carp that broke this woman's jaw as she participated in a sport created for the sole purpose of hunting this nuisance fish. Their population is growing at a rapid pace. The females can lay 2 million eggs a year, and they grow rapidly.
Once they get to a certain size, we don't have a predator that's capable of eating them, and they're just running unchecked.
So how do we get rid of them? Some say if you can't beat them, eat them. They believe that creating an appetite for silver carp will hold their population in check.
The vision about all this is to literally educate our people how to eat this fish.
But getting Americans to eat silver carp has been challenging.
People in this country just don't seem to want to pick around the bones. The biggest problem with these fish are that the fillets are filled with bones.
Now there is concern that Asian carp have a path out of the rivers and into the Great Lakes through the Chicago Sanitary and Ship Canal. So a multi-million-dollar electronic barrier has been constructed to potentially stop the migration.
With the barriers in place, we are effectively plugging the biggest hole for the movement of these fish. It would be very difficult for fish to just swim right through this waterway behind us.
But not everyone is convinced, so cleaning, draining, and drying boats every time they come out of the water can prevent the tiny microscopic creatures who lurk there from ending up in lakes and rivers where they shouldn't call home. It's the best defense we have against the ever-growing world of the silent invaders.
All right, so carp, the one the guy was holding up that was, like larger than he was across, was an average size. Once they get that big, there's no other natural predator for them. There's nothing that eats them. So they basically continue to grow and get larger, and the population continues to increase. And it said that one of the females can have up to 2 million babies a year. So they have invested programs in hunting carp. You can actually go and hunt and try to catch carp. They encourage that because it helps to keep the population down. And if you're interested and you just want to Google the carp jumping out of the water, there are some really funny videos on YouTube of people getting hit with fish. So today, we've got about 20-ish minutes. I've got a couple of things that I want you to complete. Go ahead and get those done now while you have time. That way you don't have anything to do over the weekend. You don't have homework on the weekend. You're going to work in Canvas. Today's date is the 23rd. You're going to work on your vocabulary and direct instruction. Then, if you get done with both of those, and you should have time to do that, if you have not finished your writing assignment that was due last night from Wednesday in class, please get that completed. If you get all 3 of those completed, there's a video here, and I'm going to put the link in the chat box for you as well, that you can take a few minutes to watch. So you've got 3 things to do. Number 1, Canvas, today's date, vocab, and direct instruction. Number 2, finish your writing if you need to. Number 3, okay, there is a video, and I'm going to put the link in the chat box for you. There we go. So you've got 3 things to work on. We're going to take about, let's say 15, 16 minutes on that. At 2:50, I'm going to come back here to our classroom and wrap up before you leave. But please don't exit this, okay? Don't exit our classroom. Just minimize it while you're working. Yes, the freshwater biomes writing assignment. Okay, so minimize this while you're working, and at about 2:50, about 15 or 16 minutes, we'll come back over. I will wrap up, and then I'll dismiss you for the weekend. I'm here if you have questions or problems. Otherwise, you have 3 things you can work on. Get the first, your vocabulary and direct instruction, and then your writing assignment done. That way you don't have anything to work on over the weekend. I'm here if you have questions about how to submit something or what to do, or if you just want me to check and make sure that you submitted your writing or whatever it is. Alrighty guys, take just a minute, pause whatever you're working on, come back to our classroom meeting real quick so I can wrap up before we get you out of here. Okay, take a second, pause whatever you're working on, come back to our classroom so I can wrap up real quick before we get you out of here. Things to remember, okay, please complete any assignments that you're missing. Pre-test, notes guide, quiz, and writing. Sometime next week, I'm going to go ahead and start adding in zeros, okay, for missing assignment. So make sure that you get those completed. Make sure you're caught up in Canvas. Again, it's just not something I grade right now, but it's going to be a lot harder for you to go back and do that in a month and catch up on all 22 of them the night before we have your interim. It'll be much easier to do 1 or 2 a day. Next week, I am planning to have classes in Jigsaw. Hopefully everything will work. But just double check your email and your messages right before class in case anything has changed. I'll be here a few more minutes if you have questions or problems. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Have a good weekend.